Today we're going to solve multi-step equations. Multi-step means more than one. So we have this equation, and we just did one step where you either multiplied, divided, added, or subtracted. So we need to know which one to do first. What you will do first is you will do anything that's division on the whole problem. Then you would do adding and subtracting. And then you would do multiplication and the simple division. When we look at this problem, we have adding and subtracting. There's no division line over the whole problem, so we won't do this one. So the next thing we do is we add or subtract the 4. So I'm going to take my 11x and I'm going to add 4 to both sides, which gives me 33 equals 11x. So I've done the adding and subtracting, so the next thing I do is divide. And so x equals 3. Now if we look at this problem, there is a division. So we need to get rid of that fraction because it's over the whole problem before we can do our additions. And that's what I was talking about earlier. We would do division if it's on the whole problem, then adding and subtracting. And then we would do multiplication and division to solve. So in this case, I'm going to multiply by that 8. Multiplying by the 8 on both sides. First, that cancels these 8s, which leaves me without a fraction. And then I get 40. Now this is just a one-step problem. I add or subtract, and I get my answer of 33. And there's no division or multiplication to do. In these problems where we're solving for what's called consecutive, we need to know what consecutive means. Consecutive means numbers in order. So if I have 2, the next number would be 3. If I want consecutive even, 2 would be our first one, but the next even would be 4. If I wanted consecutive odd, I'd have 3 and 5. Same with if I have a negative number. If I have a negative 5 and I want the next consecutive going in order, this would be a negative 3. If I had a negative 4, the next consecutive even be a negative 2. So negatives go down, positives go up, and everything we're doing is basically left to right, or from smallest to largest. And they're consecutive means they're in order. So these are consecutive even, and these are consecutive odd. The question is, we want to find 3 consecutive odd integers with the sum of negative 51. So we have to let our first n be our first integer. Now how do we get to the next one? Well, the next one, if we're talking about odd, and it's odd, so if I was going from 3 to 5, I'm actually adding 2. So I'm going to have n plus 2 is going to be my second odd integer. And so we want 3 of them, so the next one would be n plus 2, which is n plus 4, is my third odd integer. Now, because we're trying to find them, and sum means add, so I'm going to add these 3 things up, and it's going to equal negative 51. So if I add n plus n plus n, I get 3n. 2 plus 4 is 6, equals a negative 51. So I've created an equation based off the consecutive integers. So now I go through solving the equation. So I'm going to subtract my 6 first, because we always do adding and subtracting first if there's no division. When I subtract, I get a negative 57. When I divide by 3, I get n equals a negative 19. So if negative 19 is our first one, then our second one, let me get these right here. Paste that. So if our first one is negative 19, our next one would be a negative 17 going down, and the next one would be negative 15. These are consecutive, they're all odd, and if I add them up as a check, I get negative 51. So there's my check. So now we're looking at 3 consecutive integers with the sum. Now this time they're not even or odd. So we're going to let n be the first integer. And we don't want odd or even, so n plus 1 is our next one. And we want 3, so our third one would be n plus 2, be our third integer. For example, if my first integer was 2, my next one would be 3, my next one would be 4. And so how do I get from 2 to 3? I add 1. How do I get from 2 to 4? I add 2. And that's where these numbers come from. So that's what consecutive means. In this case, we want 3 consecutive that add up 21. So I want these 3, if I add them, so 3n plus 3 equals 21. Now I just solve the equation from here, which gives me 18, 3n divided by 3, n equals 6. So if my first integer is 6, my next one is 7, and my next one would be 8. And if I add those up, I get 21. So there's my check.